What I'd like to do is show you guys how to write an equation given the slope and the y-intercept. One thing we got to remember is the standard form of a linear equation is y equals mx plus b. And what we learned was from graphing our lines, what we learned that was our m always ended up being our slope. Because when we talked about slope, the slope of a graph is always the change in the y values over the change in the x values of a graph. And what we notice is when we found the slope, let's say it goes 2, -3. What we noticed was on this line, if my slope was 2, -3, what I noticed was that on my equation, what I noticed was my slope correlated to the number that was in front of the x. So I'm always going to know that my slope is always in front of my x. And the other thing we noticed with the b was what ended up being your y-intercept. So whenever I moved my graph, wherever my graph crossed the y-axis, that always ended up being this number on the outside. So we can always remember that the slope is always the coefficient or the number in front of your x, and your b, your y-intercept, is always going to be your constant. So all I need to do when writing my equation, I'm just going to plug in the slope for m and the y-intercept for b. And then simply all I know now is I just wrote it in the form. I know that my slope is -6, 1, and my y-intercept is -2. So therefore, if I wanted to graph this, or at least to know what's happening, I know that this is going to be a change in y over change of x. So I have a -6 over 1, because -6 over 1 is the same thing as -6. So therefore, I know that's my change. That's going to be my change in my height, or the change in y, and this will be my change in x. And that's going to be how far I'm going to go over left and right. And this is going to tell me does it cross the y-axis. So if I wanted to graph this, I'd go down to -2, because that's where it crosses the y-axis. That's the y-intercept. So I'd go down to -2. And then if I wanted to do a slope triangle, it says change in y. So that means I'm going to go down 6 over 1. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over 1. And that'd be a rough time of my sketch. But just to find the equation with slope and y-intercept, you just plug the slope in for the coefficient of x and your y-intercept as your constant term.